Hi, in today's video, you'll learn about the types of hatching and cross-hatching, how to and how not to cross-hatch, how to control and saturate the shading in your drawing, the best practices that will lead you to the success, and more. But before we start, I would like to invite you to our drawing Discord server, the place where you can share, discuss, and learn. Link in the video description. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. So let's start this video with these 20 examples of a crosshatch. Some directional, the cross, the tiled, the messy, the fast and rough, the geometric, the swirly, the sloppy, childish, schematic, organized, surface building, and the architectural. So in general, all of these examples can be useful for some particular types of drawing. So which of these are good for the architectural drawings? I would say definitely this, and all of these in the bottom. Sometimes maybe for some rough and quick sketches, I would go for this kind of a hatch. I would not go for anything that has any visible tiling in its structure. Hatching the wall like this will imply that this wall has got some additional edges in here where these hatching lines connect or overlap. So definitely my advice would be to use these types of hatching for drawing architecture, underlining the fact that this one should be used for the rough sketches. Meanwhile, the others are just more than welcome to be used in a lot of different cases. Before we're going to go any further, I would like to underline the fact that I'm not saying by any chance that these types of hatching are just not good at all. They can be used for different types of drawing, like portraits, landscapes, and maybe other drawings like cartoonish drawings, that this kind of a line will describe it really well. So I'm not saying that these are completely useless. We're just trying to point out the best hatching for the architecture drawings. So a few words about using the crosshatch. What do we use the crosshatch for? So in general, in the architectural and other types of drawings, hatching and crosshatching is used to represent the shading. And the saturation of hatching makes all of your draw more visually appealing and adds the depth into your drawing. So in general, if we're not talking about using markers, which are the great hatching and cross-hatching replacement, we have to keep in mind that hatching has to, first of all, build the surface, make it uniform, answer the question, does this surface have any structure to it, decide about saturation of shadows, and the depth of your drawing. So now I have 3 examples for you, and here's my question. Do you think that this hatching is okay? And you're probably thinking, oh, there must be a catch. He's asking me on purpose. Yes, I am. So I can tell you straight away that none of these hatching methods are okay in here. And I'm quickly going to tell you why, starting from the left-hand side. The X crosshatch, in my opinion, is not going to serve well for drawing architecture. And here's why. As you can see in architecture, according to perspective, we have so many different angles and so many different regular shapes that on a corners like this, there's a really slight difference between the angle of a crosshatch and the angle of this line. It just does not look good when the angles look to be quite random. In the architectural drawing, it's really expected to make conscious decisions and build the surface of your building, of your object, of the subject that you draw, keeping in mind its direction, characteristics, structure, surface. So using the random and uniform crosshatch like this is not going to work well in here. So as you can see, using this crosshatch the same way on a cast shadows and on the core shadows, it's just making this drawing really flat. It looks like programmed fill pattern from some software. It does not tell you about these walls, about the depth. It does not add any ambient occlusion shadows. In here, there's another example where the hatching lines follow the surface, but follow this surface kinda, I would say, recklessly. Drawing the shadows and hatching like this was more likely to imply that this is some fabric or some other material that has this kind of lines that make it build this structure, rather than suggesting that it's a shadow indeed. In the next example, I'm going to show you, of course, how to hatch and cross hatch all of these well, properly. But before we're going to proceed, let's talk about this cylinder, which is really a really interesting example. So here is another type of hatching on the shadow, which kind of unsolicitedly follows the direction of a shadow, which is not really good because it makes the feeling like there is a slide, like this surface is kind of sliding down. Maybe that's just how I perceive it, but hatching the flat ground using this direction of a shadow is never good for the architecture. I'm just going to come back to it later in the examples. And here's another example. The lines you're hatching with can, of course, sometimes, and we're going to talk about it later, follow the surface, its direction, and build it. But for the cylinders, for the cones, ellipses, spheres, it's never advisable to hatch like this. First of all, it's really hard to maintain it uniform. So with this kind of hatching, you imply that this, you don't even imply, you just making a real mess. It's going to be really hard to hatch this cylinder like this and maintain the uniform style of this hatch. And at the same time, it's too blatant for it to work, because in the reality, the cylinder, the cone, all of these shapes that have the ellipse, the circle as its base, as one of its walls, as one of its sides, there's always going to be really non-uniform shadow to it, because there's always a core and there's always some reflection that comes with the angle that light starts to reflect. And most of the times you're going to observe some cylinder in real life, you will see there's always some portion of the cylinder, there's always this glossy spot that you have to keep in mind, and it's really hard to maintain it, to represent it using the lines like this. On this side of the cylinder, particularly on purpose, I made a huge mess, which is mixing the cross hatch with this surface hatch. And we could even add this kind of a hatch, this vertical hatch. It's not advisable. It's never going to look good when there's more than one or max two types of lines that build the surface and represent the shadows. So once I've told you all of that about these types of a cross hatch, about this hatching and this little mess on a cylinder, let me show you how to do it properly. And for hatching and cross hatching today, I'm going to use the Pigma Micron 005. By the way, this video is not sponsored by Pigma. I'm just using them because I love to use them and no one pays me to do so. So not to make it any longer, let's start with the first example. And in here, I'm going to show you how to cross hatch this box. First of all, it's going to be vertical. And with this kind of a hatch, I'm going to underline the fact that these walls are vertical. So one advice I can give you straight away, for the small lines like this, I would say hatching with a wrist is going to be enough. For the bigger lines like this, hatching with your elbow is going to be really useful. And even for the longer examples, which is going to be really time consuming, you would like to hatch with your whole arm, which is going to take for ages. But unfortunately, to get the most precise and the uniform results, you have to suffer slightly, because none of the good results have ever been achieved within a snap of the fingers. So once we started to add these vertical lines, now we can make a decision upon which direction should we hatch the shadows. And there are two ways, in my opinion, and these two ways work the best for me. First option is going to be to always hatch every horizontal surfaces using the horizontal lines. And the other method would be to hatch towards the direction of one of the vanishing points. So we're going to make a little hybrid in here. Let me hatch this really quick. And now we're going to add a cross hatch to it. I'm going to be hatching at the angle of 45 degrees. And in my opinion, the 45 degrees, if you mix it with the vertical lines, which is this type of a cross hatch, is the most efficient and it gives you the best results. And let's take a look at it. So now you can see the difference between X hatch, which does not tell you anything about the surface, and with this hatch, which shows this flat surface and it shows the vertical character of these walls, as well as the shadows present, which we're going to try to saturate now. So as you can see, I'm starting to saturate my shadows a bit, and keep in mind that the best practice is to be really careful on the edges where the dark meets bright, and these edges should be the most saturated with the lines of a crosshatch. And as you can see in here, I've added another portion of lines to make it a crosshatch that go towards the vanishing point. There's never one solution for each case. You just have to be conscious and experiment and squint your eyes when you look at your subject and see, oh, there's maybe darker, this portion is darker than this one, so let's represent what I see and I would like to emphasize. I started to build the depth of this drawing, darkening the corners and the edges that are inside that lay in a shadow. And now I'm going to use some slightly thicker line to emphasize them a little bit more. I think that's it for now. We can quickly compare. So on the left side, you've got properly built surface. You can clearly see the structure. Meanwhile, on the right side, everything looks flat and the same. We cannot say if this surface is vertical, horizontal. Meanwhile, with this hatching in here, you can clearly say which shadow is a core shadow, which shadow is a cast shadow. So here we're going to be hatching using two methods. We're going to make all of these lines parallel to each other, that way presenting the surface. And you'll see how good that's going to look in a moment. So I think you can clearly see the difference that this kind of a hatching is building this object. Is it just making it look real? It just tells you that it's a flat surface. So with this hatching on this figure, if I cover the bottom, you cannot tell if it's a cone or it's a pyramid. However, in here, you can clearly say that it's a pyramid because these lines just clearly tell us the whole story about this surface. We can finally compare this pyramid to this pyramid, and they look completely different. As I said before, if you cut them like that, you would never be able to tell what figure is that. However, here you can clearly see that this is a flat wall. In this case as well, we're going to use a lot of vertical lines to make this cylinder look like a cylinder and imply that way that it's a vertical wall. And at the same time, on the edges, we're going to try to use the 45 degrees hatching to underline its roundness. What's the most important in catching in here? I can clearly see when I squint, these two areas just stand out significantly, and I would like to make this bottom stand out the same way the top does. So I think when you're taking a look at this video, you just already see that it's a really time consuming and it's a very tedious process and it's really easy to mess it up. But take a look at this result. In here, you've got properly hatched cylinder, which is not like 100% finished. There's still something to be done. I could always saturate it a bit more, but I think that's a great example to present to you the wrong hatching and the good hatching. I would like to just cover a few points about the proper hatching, the structure and the direction of the surface. It's really important to keep in mind that in hatching and cross-hatching the architecture, to use the vertical hatch. It's deadly important because it makes your building look like a building. The majority of the buildings in the world have got vertical elements to them. Of course, there might be some buildings of the, let's say, Frank Gehry that are really irregular and they have absolutely nothing vertical to them. However, hatching them using vertical lines is always gonna work okay. The next thing to keep in mind, do not recklessly follow the surface and do not mechanically and deadly schematically approach the hatching process. The horizontal surfaces and horizontal lines are the ones that underline the vanishing point and ones that underline the surface. Also, really good practice is to keep in mind the importance of the edges and where surfaces meet each other, which is the actual edge. This edge is really visible, it stands out always, and between the core shadow and the lit surface there's always a huge difference. And also keep in mind that the cast shadows are always slightly darker than the core shadows, and you would like to underline it in your drawings as well as the edges that are within the shadows. There's the least light that bounces into these corners, so keep in mind that they're always going to be the darkest parts of your drawings. Just try to be precise with your crosshatch. Try to avoid making some portions of your drawing look excessively haywire, look excessively messy and sloppy. Make sure that these edges stay sharp, that none of these crosshatch lines cross the edges. The more organized and clean lines will give you the better results. If you'd ever wonder how to draw the figures like this in perspective, I'm going to put the whole course in the video description. It's being uploaded to YouTube weekly, as well as this video is a part of this course, so make sure to check out the previous episodes. Okay, so that's it for today's video. I hope you're going to find this video helpful. So as always, see you in another video and happy drawing. Bye.